Chapter 41. The turbulence turned into a long and violent storm. Steve gave up on the idea of getting back to the gallery, as Isla was going to be busy with sick and nervous passengers for the rest of the flight. He turned on Cameron Crowe's Almost Famous. There was no better recent film than this to pass the time, especially for a romantic and music aficionado such as Steve. He poured the very large G&T with 4 gin miniatures to 1 tonic that he'd swiped from the gallery when nobody was looking. The unfulfilled love story of Penny Lane and William Miller unfolded to an unbelievable soundtrack of Led Zepp, Elton John, and The Who. It was appropriate and rang with echoes of his own situation. He was asleep by the time the bus rumbled through America to the backdrop of Stillwater singing Tiny Dancer. The thump onto American tarmac jolted him awake. As the passengers turned on their phones, the jostling for the doorway caused mayhem, much to the annoyance of the onboard crew. Groggy and still half asleep, Steve was caught in the dilemma of whether to join in and get to the front of the queue to win the race to the warm border force greeting or hang back and reconnect with Isla. He craned his neck but couldn't see her. The combination of the busy, the pissed, and the excitable thronged around his favourite seat closest to the main exit. Standing where he was, he knew he would be pushed through the aircraft door whether he wanted to or not. Whatever happened next, he was going to find her, even if he had to camp at JFK until her return leg on Tuesday morning. The distance between the plane door and entry onto American soil was the longest short trip imaginable. In the years since he had first made the journey, things had got far worse. At least Steve knew the quickest way through it and where he could sprint to beat the other passengers, get stuck behind one of the flights landing from Asia at the same time, and that was 2 hours of your life gone. Being first off the plane was worth the extra his business class exit seat cost, if only to protect his sanity. After one final look for Isla amongst the hundreds of bobbing heads jostling towards the door, he sprinted up the extension ramp that linked door to terminal. There was no other planes disembarking, and, for a Sunday afternoon, JFK was quiet. There was still the unpredictable matter of the guards to negotiate, but Stewie was well rehearsed in how to deal with the stern, overweight, gun-totting bureaucrats. An American immigration hall was not the place to let on that they were anything other than the most important people. "Good afternoon, sir. What is the purpose of your trip to the U.S.? Having made the mistake of saying sex, drugs, and rock and roll once before, Steve knew the score and chose the response that would get him through quickest. The PR story did the trick, with the occasional follow-up about the finer details, but by now his travel history told the story in more detail than he needed to provide. They knew when he was booked to go home and where he stayed, even without his customs declaration form. They probably knew he'd had a shitting morning and was about to move out of the family home. Any delay meant they were checking for inconsistencies or just fucking him around. "So, who do you represent?" The follow-up question was not expected but felt like an imposition. Careful not to show irritation, he offered a brief explanation about the band who he was meeting. It was all routine, but he wasn't going to break his record time today. The tiny victory in his regular battle against the man could wait for another day. Today was a draw, but the delay was enough that by the time he stumbled up and through the miserable focus of this man, he could see the cabin crew growing through their processing lane, use of which was one of Steve's private fantasies. He looked for Isla through the massed huddle of her colleagues, but didn't see her. With a sense of resignation, Steve walked out onto American soil. In front of him was the driver, holding a placard with his name. "Good afternoon, sir. How was your flight? I assume you're staying at the Hilton?" A polite nod would answer the question, but Steve was excellent at small talk and always chose polite conversation over silent indifference. A chat could liven the crawl into Manhattan, and the throng of vehicles going into New York had turned the road to gridlock. But the driver wasn't interested in conversation and asked if Steve minded the radio on. Aside from the US Open tennis final playing out around the corner at Flushing Meadow, the Yankees were playing the Red Sox at home. The fixture remains the Manchester United versus Liverpool of baseball. With the Yankees closing in on another divisional championship and potentially another World Series, the driver was excited at the prospect of defeating their closest rivals. Steve didn't understand the rivalry, given that Boston was 3 hours north while the Mets in Queens were only 10 miles away, and as the game petered out with another home win, Steve lost any grip on how far they'd travelled. To avoid domestic issues, he sent the arrival text to Greta. Their driver cheered as the game was done. His Yankees had walloped the Red Sox and swept the series 3-0. "There's even worse traffic ahead, buddy. Do you mind if I take a detour?" "Whatever works best. It's your patch." Steve was drained and didn't know whether he was tired or wrung out from the mental strain of his now concluded relationship. Greta, of course, hadn't responded to his text. His mood didn't improve as the driver's attempts to exercise some local knowledge backfired, having ended up so far north that they ran into the exodus from Yankee Stadium. With his patience out, Steve felt uncharacteristically irritable and had an overwhelming craving for the solitude of his hotel room. Reasoning that this typical politeness was not helping, he temporarily became more American. Hey, pal, can you just get me to my hotel as quickly as possible? What are you thinking bringing us up here? Why are we up near Harlem? Do you think I don't know where we are? He immediately felt bad. He was not the sort of person who was generally rude to anyone, let alone someone driving him to a hotel. His apologetic driver owned up to his mistake. Mr. Lewis, sir, I am really sorry. I didn't think it would be this bad. I'm doing my best. You're a very valued customer. Steve felt worse the more his driver personalised the apology. It was his turn to apologise. I'm sorry, mate. Long day. I need my bed.